Entitled Squatter Tried to Steal My Brother's House, posted by Caring Sister NCA. Several years ago, my brother, Dan, moved from California to Washington State and built a 3-bedroom house on one of 2 parcels of land that he had bought when he was 18 years old. He lived in a nice community with a small lake and had an HOA. During the 2008 economic crash, he ran into financial trouble, so we helped him. To repay us for the help, in March of 2016, he came down to California for an extended period to work on our house, which was neglected because of helping him. He was very proficient at renovating houses, and he did fantastic work. In November, my brother's friend, Jake, called him and asked if a friend of his, Tuna, could stay in one of the rooms for $400 a month. Dan had worked for many years with Jake doing construction for a house flipper, so he trusted Jake's judgment. He needed the money, and he thought it might be good to have someone trustworthy there to help watch over his house. Dan drove back up to Washington, cleaned out a room, put a lock on his bedroom door, he locked the door, and put some of his things in a storage area up out of the way in the garage. Tuna seemed nice and gave Dan $400 for the first month. There was never a written rental agreement. It was just verbal and meant to be temporary because Dan was going to return in 6 months. Tuna never sent another payment. We would call and we would ask her, and she always said it had been sent, but nothing ever arrived. So, what was going on at his house? We pieced together that something wrong was going on there after Dan's neighbor called and after questioning Jake. The neighbor complained that the house had turned into a drug house full of people and cars coming and going all hours of the night. At the beginning of June 2017, Dan drove back to Washington and handed Tuna a 3-day eviction notice. She left, stating that she had somewhere else to live and would get her stuff later. He was allowing her to retrieve her stuff at a later date. He just wanted her out. He started working on repairs and cleaning up the house. I mailed Dan a care package with some clothes, a California-themed shopping bag, and some gift cards for gas and food. 5 days later, Tuna showed up with 2 men who punched Dan in the face. They wanted to take the house back by force. Dan went to the neighbor and called the police. The police came, and instead of arresting the men and Tuna, they took Dan to jail for missing a child support court date, which then put a warrant on him. Before coming to California, he thought everything regarding child support back payments for his independent, successful 23-year-old adult child had been taken care of. He had no idea about a court date since they notified by mail, and Tuna had never forwarded his mail, which was one of the things that she promised to do. The child support scam on Dan is another issue I'll have to submit later. So the police essentially handed the house over to Tuna. She and her cronies went in, changed the locks, and placed a long metal bar across the inside of the garage door so it could not be opened from the outside. They stole the package that I sent to Dan, and then they spent his gift cards. Meanwhile, my family and I were on vacation in Hawaii, and I received a phone call from Dan in jail. I spent the whole day of my vacation in the hotel room trying to figure out how to get him out of jail. Bail bonds could not be used for child support cases. Finally, they let him out when I paid a child support payment of $350. He had been in jail for 3 days, and the squatters had dug themselves in. So when he returned to his house, he had to call the police to arrest them for trespassing. After all, Tuna had been evicted, left, and no longer had permission to be there. They were squatters by all accounts, but the state defers to people who just claim they are renting, therefore requiring a landlord to go through the court system to remove the so-called tenants who were actually squatters. The police came and screwed him over once again. Tuna claimed she was renting the entire house, and the police believed her instead of Dan. She told the policeman that she would leave in 10 days, and the policeman told Dan that he could have his house back in 10 days because Tuna said that she would leave by then. Are you kidding me? Dan was instructed to leave the premises or be arrested. It was his house. She was trespassing. He got into his minivan and drove away with nowhere to stay but in his van. Of course, Tuna did not leave after 10 days. Dan went back after the 10 days and he called the police again. Once again, the police told him to leave or be arrested. We didn't know what to do next. One of the HOA board members, who had some experience in managing real estate properties, they attempted to help us. She said that he needed a 20-day eviction notice and then Tuna would be out. And this had always worked for her when she had to evict tenants. Okay. So the 20-day notice was posted and we waited. Tuna did not leave. Dan went over to his house and started cleaning up the trash strewn all over the yard, waiting for her to leave. Tuna called the police, stating that she was a renter and he was disturbing her. Once again, Dan was asked to leave or be arrested. This time, Dan put his phone on speaker and I heard the whole interaction between him and the police. Yes, he had to leave or be arrested. Dan could not even get his construction tools out of the garage and could not work without his tools. And with being homeless, how do you even work? What was going to happen to all of his possessions, his sentimental things? His room had been broken into long before. His things were moved and people had used the room. It was near the end of summer. We were paying his mortgage payments and it was getting so hard on everyone. And then something nice happened. A kind friend, Adam, asked him to stay at his house, which Dan did. During this time, Dan worked for Adam with loaned tools and also went to some landlord and tenant educational meetings. The people at the meetings were helpful and instructed Dan on how to proceed by taking the matter to the court. The police would not go further without a court order to physically evict Tuna. It would be difficult to afford the cost to hire a lawyer, but eventually we did end up getting a lawyer. Dan posted a court appearance on the door of his house, since Tuna never answered the door, and that is what you do legally in this case. Every time he posted a court appearance, he had to legally give her 1 week notice, which he did. He showed up at court and Tuna failed to show up, so he won by default, right? Wrong. The judge said that Tuna was not given proper notice because the notice was posted by Dan instead of an anonymous person. Dan walked out of the courtroom. The lawyers from the landlord and tenant meetings were there and they couldn't believe it. Unfortunately, Adam had to move out of his house that he was renting, so Dan had to go back to living in his van. It was autumn in the Pacific Northwest and it was getting cold. The police had started harassing him if he slept in his van. We rented motel rooms for Dan, and once in a while at the motel, Dan heard a knock on the door in the middle of the night. He thought it was the motel staff and he opened the door. 2 men burst into the room and proceeded to beat the crap out of him to rob him. They broke his finger and gave him a concussion, and then Dan ran to the van, drove it to a parking lot, and slept. He refused to go back to that motel. Things were starting to go downhill in a very bad way. I found a lawyer from a nonprofit who worked for free to help. He actually used that 3-day eviction notice that Dan had given Tuna back in June as a basis for the case. I had found it online, the wording was appropriate, and it had been served properly. The lawyer had to jump through endless hoops in court appearances, and the same judge presided over every case that had to do with evictions, and she always had favored the tenants, including the entitled ones. This took forever, like 3 more months, and Dan became haggard and homeless, sick and depressed, and at times had gone missing. Once, I called every hospital and jail, homeless shelter, and even the food bank looking for him. His van was impounded 4 times, and he was hospitalized 4 times. He was endlessly hunted down and harassed by the police. 3 times I found him because I was listed as his emergency contact on his state insurance when he showed up at hospitals. While all of this was happening to Dan, my husband was in a serious motorcycle accident, and I had to take care of my husband, changing his dressings and so on. Okay, I am crying right now. This was so hard to endure, remember, and difficult to write about. I couldn't leave and fly up to Washington to help my brother, but I was doing everything down here to get his house back with the lawyer. I got him motel rooms at other motels when I could, and I paid 4 times to get his van out of impound. I sent him cell phones and care packages delivered at UPS stores. One time, Dan was lost and didn't have his van or phone. He ended up at a hospital who contacted me. He told me that he had felt really sick and had gone to the hospital earlier, who released him after examining him, even after he pleaded with them to let him stay because he felt horribly sick. He ended up collapsed on the sidewalk by the Salvation Army shelter, who wouldn't let him in, and another homeless person called 911. So, he was back at that hospital with a very serious condition affecting his heart. I told the hospital to please call me at release time so I could arrange a motel for Dan. They didn't. He was then found in a park in frigid weather, dressed in a pair of scrubs, a t-shirt, hoodie, and 1 shoe. A city policeman called me and took him to a motel where he stayed a while, and I sent a care package there. Dan told me that one time when he was being harassed by the police for cooking food in a park, he mouthed off and told them that they were communists and it was their fault that he was homeless because they gave his house to a squatter. A fire truck arrived, so he was not arrested with the firemen there, but I don't think the police liked him very much for saying that. In October, Dan was arrested for drunk driving while he was sleeping in a Walmart parking lot. What? I had to bail him out of jail over that? Every time that he didn't get to court hearings, they would post warrants for his arrest. One time, he was in jail and they refused to give him his medication, so I had to bail him out because he felt so awful. In mid-November, the police arrested Dan again for not showing up to court for that so-called drunk driving incident. He begged me to bail him out, and even though the bail bondsman paid the bail in the late afternoon, the jail released him in the middle of the night. Again, with no vehicle, it was impounded, a dead cell phone, no charger, it was in the van, no money, and so on. I found out later that this jail only releases people at night so they can get credit and are paid by the state for the whole day. That night he was released, it was our deceased mother's birthday. Dan was then found unconscious in a ditch by a seawall in a Starbucks parking lot. He had a broken femur, broken hip, cracked spine, and a head contusion, and that finger was still broken from the motel incident. The doctors evaluated that he had been hit in the back of his head with a blunt object. We don't know who did it. The last thing he remembers was a police car driving by. He was airlifted to a major hospital in Seattle, about 50 miles from where he was. I took a flight up to Seattle as soon as I could and I visited him. The doctor showed me the x-rays and he had countless rods and pins put into his body to help put him back together. By this time, we were getting closer to having his house back. I went by the house with Adam's brother-in-law, Paul, who was packing heat. We pounded on the door and I demanded that the squatters hand over my dead mother's rocking chair. The stupid friend, Jake, he was there, and he handed it through the door. It is a big heirloom mission-style chair, and they had burned into the chair in 4-inch letters the word wasted. The court order finally became available, but then we had to schedule the eviction according to when the police had the time to do it, which was another 2 weeks. It was scheduled for the beginning of December. I went back home to California briefly, and I returned the night of the eviction. Dan was in the hospital for almost 2 weeks. When he was released, I arranged a nice long-term stay type hotel back near home for him to live at until the police evicted the squatters. Paul helped us a lot. He was with the police at the eviction, changed all the locks, and secured the house. He picked up Dan at the hotel, and Dan got to witness the eviction of that entitled witch from heck. She was the only one left in the house. A notice had been posted on the door to warn everyone to leave, but as usual, she didn't think there would be any reason that she would have to leave. It took her completely by surprise. The police pounded on the door and demanded that she leave immediately. She asked if she could get this and that, but no, she couldn't. She grabbed her little dog, her purse, and left with nothing else. The police put a notice on the door after Paul had secured everything. Dan was driven back to the hotel, and then I arrived. I wish that I could have seen the eviction, but I couldn't get a flight early enough. The neighbors said that a bunch of people came to the house that night, pounding on the door trying to get in, but they couldn't. They almost called the police, but the people left. We went over there every day for about a week to clean up. Dan was confined to a wheelchair and was on heavy meds, so it was hard. He couldn't help too much, but he did his best. The house was a disaster. There was literally 5 tons of garbage in the yards around the house. The trash disposal service was not activated during this time, so they just piled it up around the house. On one side of the house was a huge pillar of trash made out of wire fencing. It was about 8 feet by 8 feet and at least 12 feet high. The front yard was awful, with several piles of trash about 4 feet high. Tuna left every single thing in the kitchen, in the cupboards, and rotting food in pans. The carpets were soaked in dog pee. There were clothes and junk everywhere, and there was loads of crushed glass embedded into the gravel driveway like she wanted us to get flat tires. Over the doorway from the house into the garage was a dangerous booby trap which literally could have killed someone. It was made out of large heavy metal clamps with a glass jewelry case teetering on top of the clamps. It could have fallen on top of someone's head if not discovered and someone jarred it a little. The water had been shut off for months by the HOA because they controlled the well and owned the water system. As soon as you don't pay the HOA fees, water is shut off. All the toilets were clogged up with crap. The sewage system was impossible to unclog, and later DB discovered that they had thrown dirt and plastic containers down the pipe. He had to go under the house and disassemble the pipes to get everything out. Hanging up on the wall in plain sight in the master bedroom was the California shopping bag that I had mailed to Dan in the package that Tuna had stolen. She hung it there to taunt me. I am not super religious, but I felt the worst kind of evil there and had to pray and debunk the evil spirits from that house. I stayed for weeks there cleaning up and hired some people to do yard clean out to get the front yard clean. Later, Dan and Adam dealt with a pillar of trash at the side of the house. Every construction tool that belonged to Dan was stolen. He couldn't work much from a wheelchair, but needed the tools to repair his own house. Dan persisted, though. He finally got to the point where he could walk. Now, he can't walk for long periods, he gets tired easily, but he can do things slowly. He has some nice roommates that drive him places and take care of him at times. Many of his tools have been replaced. He sanded off the wasted message on Mom's rocking chair too. We have sunk a lot of money into helping him, but what else is one supposed to do? It was a life or death situation. That was his house that he had built so many years ago. This was the most wicked thing that I have ever encountered. It was coming from all directions. We heard that the creepy squatter died a year later. No one wanted to take her in, and she went from person to person, staying wherever. If she would have been decent and kind, she probably could have been a roommate and had a place, but she thought she could just take someone's house. In a crazy twist of events, when asked if OP thought that the police and judges were co-conspirators in this case, OP replied, "We did suspect that often. You wouldn't believe what a hard time they gave his lawyer, who followed all the protocol to the T. Someone wanted his house, and we weren't sure it was even the squatter. My first time reading this story was the live read as I read it for the recording, and I never expected it to get this crazy. Hospitalized and everything. I hope everything is okay now, OP. What a story. Neighbor's off-leash dog attacks and injures my dog, sister, and myself. Now she's trying to sue me, but we're the ones with $29,000 in medical bills. Original poster is Free Run Lady 92. I'm not a lawyer and this isn't legal advice, but let's see what the story has to say. We live in the city limits of Wake County, Raleigh, North Carolina, where there are strict leash laws. Our neighbors moved in next door about 6 months ago and have 2 large Labradors who are let out the back door into the open yards each day and night. One of their dogs is very sweet and well behaved, while the other is rather aggressive and will charge at people and other dogs. We have asked them multiple times to walk their dogs on leashes and explained about the city leash laws of our state and county, but they refuse to keep them on leashes. 2 months ago, one of their labs charged at myself and my small beagle from across the yard, and the dog's owner just sat there and watched as I tried to fight off her dog while picking up my beagle. The dog bit my arm enough to draw blood, and I kicked her dog to get it to stop and back off from its attack. The owner went into a rage over me kicking her dog, and the next day filed a complaint against me with our HOA. That backfired because the HOA contacted me for my side of the story and ended up charging the neighbor a $250 violation of the HOA agreement fee. I didn't file an animal control report because my bite wasn't that bad and I thought the HOA fine would set them straight. Also, for the fact that it's not the dog's fault her owner is an idiot. They continue to let their dogs run free, and we have multiple videos of them letting their dogs run free and of the aggressive dog running onto our porch and throwing her body against our glass door, trying to get at our dogs inside of our house. Last month, I confronted our neighbor with the multiple videos and told her that she needed to walk them on leashes, and we were no longer willing to be afraid to use our back porch or walk our dogs anymore. And we told her that this was the last time we'd be nicely asking her, and next time we'll call animal control. Fast forward to 6 days ago when I woke up to the sound of one of my dogs, for lack of a better term, screaming. I jumped out of bed and ran into the yard where my sister and one of my beagles were being attacked by her dog. My sister had curled up around our dog and was being repeatedly bitten by the neighbor's dog. I tackled the neighbor's dog and, not proud to say as a lifelong animal lover, proceed to grab the dog by her neck and force her to the ground by her neck and shove her head into the ground while practically sitting on the dog to control her. The neighbor finally got her dog inside. The results were, my dog had a huge chunk ripped out of her throat, multiple rips in both ears, 6 broken teeth on her bottom jaw, and a shattered front paw and broken arm, and multiple bites to her face and rib cage. My dog needed all broken teeth removed, pins in her arm and paw, dozens of stitches, and a skin graft, had no idea they could do this for dogs, to close the hole in her neck. My sister needed 38 stitches from the bites she received, and I ended up with 29 stitches from bites that I received, and all 3 of us are on a plethora of antibiotics and follow-up care, including rabies shots for my sister and I because her dog had no current shots. Those shots are not pleasant in any way. Our combined medical and vet bills are $29,000, with still needing follow-up visits for all of us over the next few months. She's refusing to pay anything at all and claims she is not at fault because our yard isn't fenced. She's also claiming she's going to sue us because apparently I broke 2 of her dog's ribs when I tackled her to the ground. I cleared out my savings account of $3,500 to make the basic payments to save my dog's life, and I don't have any more money to hire a lawyer. We can hardly afford the copays on our insurance to get our rabies treatments and prescriptions filled. I filed to get an advance on my pay, but it can take up to 2 weeks to go through, and I was served with a court summons today for injuries to her dog and her pain and suffering from the trauma of her hurt pet. The claim also states that I intentionally caused harm to her pet and used unnecessary force to subdue her pet. I'm a 4'10" female and my sister is a 4'8" female. Her dog is almost as big as I am. I really don't know where to start on how to deal with this. I feel like we have a solid case due to the videos and the paperwork from the HOA for the first time that she tried to blame us. I also have messages that span her time as our neighbor via the Nextdoor app, where she admits to walking her pets off leash and her refusal to stop because it's her house. How in the world can I fight this without being able to pay a lawyer's fee up front? First update. Thank you all so much for the advice. We're feeling much more hopeful and I feel like I can actually sleep tonight. You're all wonderful, kind internet strangers and we appreciate you all. Update after filing police report. My sister and I went to the police station this morning. The officer suggested that we each file our own reports for multiple reasons, with one being my sister wasn't involved in the first attack and we each technically own one dog even though we share expenses. One dog I bought from a rescue and is property in my name, and the attacked dog was bought under my sister's name. The video evidence was used for both reports, but the messages were used for mine only since they came from my account. The officer called animal control and viewed it as a good use of their weekend emergency service because the neighbor did not and could not provide proof of a rabies shot and is viewed as a public health risk, and no one can confirm the dog's violence isn't attributed to that. That's probably not the case, but city law requires all dogs within city limits to be registered with the city and up to date on all shots. He suggested that we take our dogs and cars and leave the neighborhood between 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. or until we receive a follow-up call from animal control. He also suggested that we call our homeowner's insurance after we were done at the station and had a police report to give them. The police took photos of our injuries and said that we need to take pictures of our dog once we got home. We already took photos of ourselves and dog last night after reading through the comments on here, but they wanted their own to file with the report. We asked about getting a protection or restraining order, but he said it would be very hard to do because we'd have the burden of proof showing that she maliciously and intentionally used her dog to harm us or prove a history of stalking us. My boyfriend went out this morning and bought 2 cameras and a stack of SD cards. He has one set up to look out over our backyard and one looking out to where we park our cars and front porch. This lady is still letting her dogs run out free after the attack, and we can get that on video. My sister, dogs, and I are going to spend the night at my boyfriend's house tonight just so we can stay clear of this crazy neighbor. We called our insurance company and are giving them all the reports, the bills, evidence, and so on. And they're sending an agent out tomorrow afternoon to take videos and pictures of both yards, and they gave us a list of local law firms that specialize in personal injury and property damage cases and will work in conjunction with whatever lawyer that we go with. One thing the insurance company pointed out is that they don't see any law firm named in my summons and think that she may have filed and be representing herself. They also said the roommate texting us all week saying that they'd pay for everything could be viewed as an admittance of fault, but a lawyer would be able to confirm that. We did message most of the neighbors on our row, and a few of them have had bad experiences and are willing to write statements. The kicker is, the family directly behind us has a teenage son who took a video on his phone of the big attack. The neighbor dog had tried to attack her son's cat while he was on the back porch once, and her son heard the yelling and whipped out his phone. I haven't seen it yet, but his mother said they'll gladly turn it over to our lawyer and write statements. We're going to be busy this week and have a lot to do to get everything together, but it seems like we have a very solid case. Final update. My sister and I spent the weekend after I posted researching local lawyers that were suggested by our insurance and found 3 we wanted to contact. The guy we went with is amazing and more vicious than the neighbor's dog. He is also willing to take payment after a judgment or settlement and offered us a lower percentage than what we've researched is the norm. Ends up, his son had been attacked by an off-leash dog once, and he feels very strongly that irresponsible dog owners understand the repercussions of their actions and that the neighbor is a threat and this needs to be handled quickly. The neighbor's mean dog has been put down. She was deemed uncontrollable and not able to be rehabbed. We've seen the nice dog over the last few days with the roommate, so she must have paid the fines to get her back. Our lawyer responded to her case against me and confirmed that we'd be meeting them in small claims court. She was also served with 2 separate lawsuits, one from myself with my medical cost, including estimated long-term cost and rehab cost, lost work and vacation days, pain and suffering, and destruction of my property. I'll explain the destruction of property shortly. One for my sister, including estimated long-term medical cost, lost work and vacation days, property damage, our dog, and pain and suffering. Her lawsuit against me has a court date of March 5th. After she was served with our lawsuits, she apparently desperately tried dropping the case against me, but the prosecutor denied her request. Didn't know they could do that. And then she tried contacting our lawyer multiple times to ask him to get the prosecutor to drop the case. He informed her that this wasn't something he had control of, and we'd still be moving forward with the 2 lawsuits against her. She finally got herself a lawyer, and our lawyer was contacted with settlement offers that, in his term, were laughable, and we refused the settlement offers. Our lawyer used past cases of dog attacks in North Carolina where settlements of over $800,000 were paid out, and that involved cases where the dog's owners actually tried to stop the attack. Now for some extra facts. My left wrist is going to need surgery, and that's scheduled to take place on February 27th. Our dog had the drain removed from her neck, and her skin graft is healing up nicely, but she's still in a cast with pins in her paw. The vet thinks that she'll have a limp, but will recover with no other long-lasting injuries. She still refuses to go out the back door anymore and will cry and plant if we try. The destruction of property in my claim comes from those cameras that my boyfriend installed. The day after her dog was put down, she literally took a baseball bat to everything in our front and backyard. She broke our porch railing, smashed all of our flower pots, bent our hammock's metal base, and used some kind of utility knife to slice up the hammock, tore the plants out of the ground in our garden, including pulling up imported maple trees, dumped some sort of substance that had a jelly-like consistency into our koi pond, killing all the fish, and broke various other things in our yard. She straight up went on a rampage that was all caught on the cameras. She also left 2 notes on our door. One threatened to shoot our dogs and that she'd have someone beat us up. We called the cops immediately and they took it seriously. They asked if we wanted to press charges, and we did. Our lawyer used the notes and the camera footage to get an emergency protection order for us, and we haven't so much as seen her since, though we see her car come and go. The video of the attack that the other neighbor's son took was a pure godsend. It shows how she just sat there and did nothing to try and stop the attack. It also shows her audibly laughing during it. She only started trying to help when I started smashing her dog into the ground. We also got statements from multiple neighbors, and our lawyer is working on getting the multiple complaints from the other families from the HOA. He said that it is pointless to go after the HOA, and we wouldn't get worthwhile results from them. Our lawyer did tell us that the HOA has started the eviction process against the neighbors, but that could take a long time and can be contested. There was also a memo sent out to the neighborhood about leash rules, and that there will be an upcoming vote about possibly muzzling dogs if they're in common areas outside of our private properties, and other new neighborhood rules concerning pets. I honestly can't tell if this lady had some sort of mental breakdown or is just plain crazy. Either way, my sister and I both have our separate court dates against her in mid and end of March. OP also said about the case potentially not getting them much monetary compensation. Even if we don't get much of anything, maybe it'll at least make her stop and think more clearly in the future. And about the aggressive dog, thank you, I do feel bad that her dog got put down. I still feel like it's not the dog's fault that her owner never trained her, but she was dangerous. The follow-up post says, I know OP said they'd be sure to update, but it's been years since their last post or comment, and we have a good idea of the outcome, so I'm marking this as concluded. The craziest part of this all is that this lady saw these things happening and did nothing to stop it. In fact, even encouraged it, laughing. If you're going to own a dog or a pet, it's your responsibility to make sure that they are cared for and not hurting other people. And not to mention all of this getting caught on camera and she still doesn't care, or even so she could try to back away and be like, oh, I'm sorry, but you know what? She's crazy and just destroys OP's property. Funny enough, it all gets caught on camera. She's not going to get away with that because OP was smart enough to stick those cameras up around the house with her boyfriend and know that this would be the proof to catch her in the act. Funny enough, OP probably thought that she would just be catching the dog doing the bad things, but got footage of her crazy neighbor doing thousands of dollars of damage. I think this neighbor lady really should take better care of her dog, and it is unfortunate any time an animal must be put down. But seriously, not having shots, attacking neighbors, cats, dogs, and people, having medical bills, and then getting sued and trying to fight back, this is just insanity. I'm not a lawyer, this ain't legal advice, but all I can say is it's easy to tell that this neighbor is crazy. What do you think? Way to go, OP. 5 police cars showed up tonight at my neighbor's house, posted by Belgian Els. So, my cat didn't come home for dinner. Very strange. He's usually the one, we have two, demanding I get to opening the tins. So I look in the usual spots. Is he stuck in a closet or the garage? Nothing. I eat dinner, thinking he'll be around meowing at any minute. Well, no sign of Frank, the cat. He's mostly an indoor lazy guy who wanders a bit around outside. Anyway, my neighbor previously, a month ago or so, had yelled at my wife about the cat crapping in his garden. Okay, that's not cool. He has a litter box and we have a garden. I get that that's a bit annoying. So anyway, I go over to his place and knock on his door. Said that I understand my cat has been bothering you. I gave him my business card and said if he ever bugs you again, please call or text me and I'll deal with whatever mess or whatever. Meanwhile, I'll try to improve the situation. I bought some dirt, catnip, and made an outdoorsy litter area for my guy. Showed it to him a few times. We made an effort to keep him inside more. But I'll be honest, 8 years as an indoor-outdoor, he gets antsy and crafty about getting outside. Anywho, I'm wandering around the roads near my place, hoping not to find a tire print over my cat. No sign. He doesn't come home, so now it's worry time. I kinda know in the back of my mind that the neighbor did something. So I'm wandering around outside and I approach his driveway, calling for Frank, and I hear him. He's meowing for me. Okay, so I follow the sounds and, yep, he's trapped in Buddy's garage. So I tried the door, figured he could have wandered in and got stuck. Ah, crap, he's got stuck on mine before. The door's locked, dang it. Knocked on Buddy's door, said, hey, I hear my cat stuck in your garage. He says, verbatim, yep, bye, and goes to close the door. I knock again, but louder. Now this guy is a boomer, probably 65 years old, and he says, what? And I said, man, you got my cat in there, just let him out, thanks. And he says, no. At this point, I'm at the front door and he's closing it as I put my foot in there and I'm like, buddy, freaking let him out. He says no again. And I said, should I break this window to get him out? He pulls out his phone and starts recording and says, you're threatening me. And I'm like, bro, you stole my cat, let him freaking out. And he says no again. Goes to close the door and I knocked it hard as it closed and popped open. Guess it didn't latch. And he tells his wife, sorry to say, but I think he has done things to his wife, to call 911. And she does. And he slams the door with his shoulder and locks it. I hear them literally on emergency calling the police. I'm like, okay, he stole my cat. He can't keep him, that's not a thing. So I dialed the non-emergency line and told my end. Neighbor threatened my cat before, now he has him captive. And she tells me the squad car will be there soon to talk to him. And like 5 seconds later, the first car pulls up. I give him my ID, tell him my cat is in there. He says, well, how do I know? I said, I can hear him. Well, does he have a cat? No, I'm pretty sure he hates cats. I show him a picture and say, he's in the garage here. 2 more cars pull up, 4 more cops. I'm like, wow, this is really something. First cop talking to Buddy, watching the video. But then 2 more. 5 total. One guy is like SWAT gear ready to kill somebody. They talk to him. Cat is meowing like crazy beside us in the garage. The SWAT guy's like, did you steal his cat? The other cop says, he says he did. Says that this guy's, mine, cat is in there. He craps on my property, right there. He points to a little dirt patch behind a bush. I'm like, I'm sorry man, I didn't tell my cat to come over here and find a good litter box. I'm working on it. SWAT guy is like, we drove 130 kilometers per hour or 90 miles per hour up here because cat dung? Neighbor says he was threatening me. And at that point, I said I just asked how I should go about getting my cat out of the garage. SWAT guy tells Buddy that he's called a break and enter to 911 because I was sneaking around his garage. And the first cop is like, this guy stole his freaking cat. SWAT guy says, why'd you call a break and enter? Neighbor says I didn't. And he's like, should we go down to the shop and pull the tape? Neighbor starts pulling a, don't you know who I am? Don't talk down to me crap. Those are quotes. And the guy is saying it's a crime to call emergency for a non-emergency. Like down to the station kind of crime. First cop is like, let the cat out now. And he finally does. Frank runs out and home. The cop says this is stupidly unreasonable that you call 911 over cat dung. Guy finally apologizes, shakes my hand and says sorry to me. I said, do you still have my number? I'll literally come fix whatever he messes up while I try to get him trained to stop using your garden and the dirt patch. The cop says to me to do what I can to keep the cat indoors. I'm saying I do try, but my niece and 5-year-old live with us and sometimes he's crafty. Anyway, now I am not sure what is going to happen if my cat gets out again. What a crap show. I'm wired and can't sleep though, so I thought I'd share. Accidentally burned down my neighbor's fence and she tries to milk me for $10,000. Judge humbles that butt up real quick. Posted by T-Bird Kamikaze. So it's been about 4 years since this happened. I was about 18 at the time, working for a security company. There were constant call-offs and no-shows. I have no idea why. But being so young and naive, I was constantly working 16-hour shifts and not coming home until 8 a.m. Also, I lived with my father at the time. The time frame of this was around the 4th of July. I finally had a day off and my best friend was back in town for vacation. We decided to get together and chip in on some good old American fireworks. To be fair, I have had nothing but bad experiences with fireworks, so I had no idea how this would be any different. We got home with the fireworks and we laid them all out on the floor. Sparklers, bottle rockets, cakes, and Roman candles. I say, why don't we mess around with some sparklers since it's still not dark yet? Great idea. We go into my backyard where it hasn't rained in well over 2 months and is extremely dry. You see the problem here? One of the little sparkies from mine and my friend's sparkler made contact with the ground and it made 2 small fires that quickly spread to a large area. I ran as fast as I could to grab the garden hose and quickly started spraying down the fire. It was of no use. It was spreading faster than I could spray it. I handed my friend the hose and called 911. What felt like hours was only 4 minutes and the fire was spreading to the neighbor's fence. The neighbor came outside and they were fairly calm to grab their hose and spray down the fence along with the dead grass in her yard. The fire department shows up finally and I tell my friend, only one of us needs to get in trouble. You should leave. He was reluctant to leave because he felt equally responsible, but I convinced him that I didn't want him to get in trouble and have to drop out of college. My neighbor was super chill about the entire situation at first. I told her that we could talk about replacing the fence and get some quotes to repair it. She was just super grateful that everyone was okay. About 2 hours after the fire, the arson and fire investigator came to question me about the fire. I told him the truth. I said I was in the backyard by myself playing with fireworks and accidentally lit the ground on fire. I had gotten off that day without being hit by any charges and was commended for being honest. Here is where it goes downhill very fast. About a week later, I get a knock on the door from the neighbor. I opened the door and she handed me 2 pieces of paper for me to look at. There was a quote for the fence valued at around $4,000 and an estimate for lawn care valued around $6,000. These were really shady and just typed out on a Microsoft Word document with no logo or company name. She then adds, I will also be having you pay my water bill for 3 months because the new yard will need lots of water. Now, the fence that this woman had before was raggedy and fallen apart. Her yard? Dead grass, weeds everywhere, never even mowed it. Now, looking at this paper, she wants a mahogany fence, a brand new backyard with flowers and trimmed hedges. I said, I need to get an estimate myself. This just doesn't feel right. She says, remember you agreed to replace my fence, and a real man keeps promises. I shut the door and called my dad to tell him about what just happened, and he flipped the heck out and told me, son, don't you give that jerk a single dime. He gives me the number to his handyman and tells me to take care of it. The next day, I had the guy come out for an estimate, and the neighbor ran outside flailing her arms. I did not give you permission to get an estimate on my fence. Technically, it separates the property line, so it's both of our fences. She calls the cops on me for having a contractor, and they ultimately can't do a single thing because I'm on my property. He quickly finishes an estimate off at about $1,200. I also knew a guy who did lawn care from my time working at the grocery store. He estimated the lawn reseeding while she was away from the house to be about $800. After I get these estimates, I give copies to the woman, and she's having none of it. I don't know these people, I don't want them near my house, and they're probably some really crappy contractors. I said, no, I know them personally, and they're really nice people, and they do great work. She shut the door in my face and I went on my way. I ended up working a 16-hour shift that night, and I got home at 8 a.m. And this woman comes knocking on my door at 9 a.m. and demanded I speak to her. I explained, hey look, I would really love to do this, but I just got home and I have to be back at work in less than 5 hours. I need to sleep. She goes, what kind of crazy lazy butt sleeps in until 2 p.m.? At this point, I had about lost it and told her, you can either accept my $2,000 for my quotes or kiss my butt and get nothing. She stood there for a while with her mouth gaped open, but she accepted my offer and planned to meet down at the notary the next morning. I spent that night after I got off work writing a contract and gathering the $2,000 in cash. The next morning, I wake up and grab this contract to meet down at the notary. I was thrilled to finally be done with this broad and never speak to her again. I waited for her for over 3 hours and she didn't show up. I get a call from her saying, I'm sorry, the $2,000 isn't enough. I'm having my guys start work on this project and you will be paying me full price. Oh, really? After that, I did not say a single word to her and I watched for a few months as these guys turned her backyard into an oasis, complete with a small pond, brand new sod and flowers, the whole 9 yards. Come to find out, she had plans to remodel these things for a long time and was just waiting for the opportunity to go through with it. Also in this time, she used her remodel funds to go on a trip to Hawaii. You know how I found out about this? She was bragging about it on the neighborhood Facebook group and didn't know I was in it. I have a different Facebook name than my real name. Are you ready for the revenge? Now, 4 months after the fire and all of the remodels, I get served papers to go to court for $10,300. At 18 years old, I'm having to hire a lawyer to work my case. When we finally do get into court, I lay everything out. The quotes, being harassed multiple times, not showing up after agreeing to a deal, not wanting me to get my own quotes, required by law by the way, and her bragging about screwing me out of money, and I have proof of all of this. The judge looked at her and said, ma'am, with all due respect, you're out of your daggone mind. Not only did this young man tell you the truth of what happened, he offered to pay you more than what he was supposed to. Your lawn was already dead before the fire occurred, therefore he is only responsible for the fence of $1,200. I will also deduct from this his lawyer fees of $800. So I'm thinking, so I burned this woman's fence down and all I'm having to give her is $400? Cool. She took a huge financial loss from this. Not sure how much the Hawaii trip cost her, but she was in serious debt. She ended up having to sell the house because of it and moved into a smaller house. Haven't heard anything from her since. Now I do need to clear a few things up. I am not saying that I don't feel bad for burning down my neighbor's fence. I felt really bad about it and wish we could have handled it more civilly. I would have been happy to meet in the middle or get multiple quotes. To this day, I still do not use fireworks because we could have really hurt someone. What I have learned through this though is that it's best to take responsibility from your actions from the gate. The fire investigator had seen the leftover fireworks near the area of the fire and said he would have slapped cuffs on me and I would be in jail for arson if I would have given him any other answer. I was not criminally charged and the incident was deemed an accidental fire. Thank you for the people in the comments for giving me information about how much a fence actually cost. I've never had to purchase a fence before, so I just believed what the contractor had told me without second thought. I mean, this Karen is entitled to what? No, this is fraud through and through, and just knowing that she had this plan from the get-go, waiting for that right moment to strike her Karen fangs and claws, to just get on this 18-year-old guy, take advantage of him because he probably doesn't know any better, right? Well, she assumed she had it in the bag, you know what they say about assuming, right? And then has the full remodel done, turns his down, waits for it, and then boom, judge drops the hammer on her from the get-go. But you know what? She thinks she won, going to Hawaii on a trip while doing this remodel, thinking that she's all high and mighty. Well, guess what? The Facebook group tells no lies, bragging about your achievements, quote unquote, like this, and then OP finding out because he was in the group and she didn't even know it is the icing on this delicious cake. OP, way to go. What do you think? Karen was annoyed that I didn't evenly divide 7 by 2, posted by Meth Hardy. I used to work for a company where we went into schools in our area to perform a free 1-hour wacky science show teaching kids the importance of saving water. Our local area relies on aquifers, which are underground porous rock that stores rainfall, for the majority of our water, so it's important to teach kids both about how the water cycle works where we live and about not wasting water. This incident occurred 5 years ago and it just came on my Facebook memories, and it very much fits this sub. Myself and my colleague were at a school in a very affluent area performing our water show, teaching the kids in our own unimitatable, irreverent way. The school had invited parents into the assembly, so we had about 30 or so parents seated at the back of the hall along with the 200 or so kids. After the show, which went down an absolute treat, my colleague had gone to collect the car, which we couldn't park near the school, while I had remained behind to tidy up and move all of our kit to the front entrance to the school where he would be pulling up. Suddenly, a parent came up to speak to me. Karen says, "Hello, do you mind if I have a quick word?" I reply, "Yeah, of course not." "Well, let me start off by telling you how fantastic that show was." I'm waiting for the but I say, "Hey, thank you very much." But, my internal monologue says, "There it is. I was wondering if you noticed that you had picked more boys than girls as your volunteers, rather than an equal number of each." Okay, you're asking me if I realized that I didn't pick an equal number of boys and girls as my volunteers? Yes. Yes, I was aware of this, mainly because we need an odd number of volunteers in the show. It's very difficult to keep the numbers of each equal when the total number is odd. Karen looks at me while trying to think. "Did you notice that while we picked 4 boys and 2 girls for the aquifer experiment, we picked a girl as the solo volunteer for the toothbrushing experiment? And the toothbrushing volunteer does a lot more than the aquifer volunteers do. So, yesterday when we did this exact same show in a different school, we had 4 girls and 2 boys for the aquifer experiment and then a boy for the toothbrush. We always try to keep things as fair as possible. I'm just saying because my daughters were here today and I want them to enjoy science." Well, hopefully they did. "I also noticed that on your banner," and she indicates the pop-up banner off to one side, "that you have 2 boys and 1 girl on that. That's hardly equal." "Yeah, that is true, but with the size of the banner, 3 children was the right number. 2 would have left too much empty space, while 4 would have been too crowded." "Then why didn't they pick 2 girls?" "Well, because we made several mock-ups of the banner and showed them to different children, and the most popular design was that one." "Well, I don't think..." I interrupt and say, "You may be pleased to see that the fun pack that each child gets to take home has only 1 boy and 1 girl on the cover." I pick up the pack and I show her. "That's nice." Karen walks off and a teacher comes over to me. The teacher says, "Hey, what was all that about?" "Apparently, I need to find a way to pick an equal number of boys and girls despite the total number adding up to an odd total." "Okay, so because you didn't pick either of her 2 daughters as any of your handful of volunteers out of 200 children in the school?" "It would seem that way, teacher." "What did you say to her?" "Basically that 7 isn't divisible by 2, but across multiple schools we make sure to keep things equal." "And what did she say?" "That's nice. I mean, 7 divided by 2, if this Karen had even gone to any kind of school would see that you can't make that equal. You can't have half a kid and do this. I don't know how she doesn't get this. You know what? What if she actually does get this and she just wanted her kids picked? That entitlement of her kids, not anybody else's, because hers are better. She has to have her way as a Karen. I think this Karen's crazy. I wonder if she actually knew the math was the issue here, or if it was just a facade, an excuse for her to try to get her way with her kids. What do you think? Way to go, OP, for standing your ground." This is an insane entitlement Karen story. Now, I am no lawyer, but just checking this story out is insane. It's called "My Mother Has Forged My Signature on Checks and Stolen $60,000, posted by Angel in Blue Jeans. I kind of don't know where to begin. Right now, I'm trying to figure out what kind of attorney I need. My mother has been forging my signature on checks addressed to me since I was 18. There have been 4 checks in the amount of $15,000 each, totaling to $60,000. The money I get is from a lawsuit from when I was a minor, but I had no idea about any of it because I was really young when it happened. I have since reported her to the insurance company's fraud department, my local police, I live in Illinois, she lives in California, my bank, as well as USPS, since she has been stealing and opening my mail to get these checks. I decided to send her and my dad an email outlining everything I know with the proof, which is a forged check in the bank statements, and she texted me this morning denying all of it, but in the same breath said that I owed them that money because they raised me. I'm starting to ramble. She has since decided to just ignore me, so I'm going to look into an attorney. It seems like it's insanely expensive just to get a consultation, so I'm wondering which specialty of attorney I should be looking for. Is this a family matter, or does the $60,000 in fraud and mail theft make it a different specialty? Now, a lot of the story has been left out because I just assumed I'd need to find a lawyer. The injury occurred when I was 4 or 5, and I'm now 23. When the lawsuit happened, my mother was not even legally my mother yet, as I was later adopted by her. The checks started coming when I was 18. I didn't even know about the injury or lawsuit, let alone that I was owed money, so I had no idea that any checks were coming. I just found out about this very, very recently. I know the name of the company paying me out, but I don't even know the name of the establishment where I was hurt as a kid. I filed a police report in my state as the PD where she lives said it's technically out of their jurisdiction. I'm a bit confused because the crime was committed there, but they said that the crime has to be reported based off of where the victim is. I filed a fraud report with the insurance company who has been sending the checks to my mother's address. Everything has been updated to my address and information, and a passcode was put on the account that only I know. They are mailing me paperwork with copies of the forged checks as well as an affidavit I have to sign regarding the fraud. I made a report with my bank and they were jerks and said there's nothing they can do and were extremely short with me. Finally, I made a report with UPS investigation department. While the checks were sent to my mother's address, where I lived as a kid, they still had my legal name on them, not hers. So she opened mail that wasn't addressed to her. Now, while the crime was committed in California and I live in Illinois, I believe the settlement was in Colorado. That's where I lived before I was adopted, and that's where the accident occurred. My aunt was the one who told me about the money and helped me find out who the insurance company was. My aunt, mom's sister, told me that when my now mom and dad adopted me, they had to submit paperwork to prove guardianship with the insurance company, and that's when the company changed the address from my childhood home in Colorado to their home in California. Even though my adopted mom committed the crimes, my adopted dad knew everything that was going on. They both profited off the money, and they did a huge backyard remodel. OP updates with, I'm not being nonchalant, I'm just more in shock. My mom is middle and high and lower high class. I'm quite literally dirt poor and pregnant. I'm adopted, so I know that she's never really viewed me as her own. It just seems unreal to me that she could steal $60,000 from me and then talk crap about me to my family because I couldn't afford prenatals around my birthday. Try to extort, harass, and ruin me, I'll make sure you're rightfully convicted of disability fraud. Posted by Lord Smaldemort. I lived in an illegal rental in a place that you'd call a landlord's market. There was a housing shortage, and although I had a great job, no credit problems, no background issues, it was impossible to rent somewhere affordable because of my dog. I eventually found a great place, but it came with a nutty landlord. She lived on the property. I'm not a choosing beggar, however, so I take it. For 12 months, I endure the landlord's violation of my rights, taking deposits that she should not have, micromanaging my personal life and my guest, and it's pretty awful. She's always high on painkillers with tiny pin needle pupils, telling me weird crap and trapping me in conversation that I'd rather not hear. Faced with homelessness, I take the trampling of my rights and privacy. She made me miserable. After a year, I had enough. She crossed the line when she had my boyfriend removed by the police when I was at work one day. He had been staying for under 48 hours. I was gone for 2 weeks at home and had arrived back to my rental 48 hours before this. No one was in my rental while I was gone. On top of tossing my boyfriend out, she delivered a bill for his rent and utilities for staying the past 2 weeks that I was gone. No one was in my house. She already bullied me. I guess she thought she could extort me. She created fake court paperwork to intimidate me. The bills I received from her are insane. They are not the writings of a lucid human. She gets all sorts of details wrong and makes personal statements that are inappropriate. The place was empty and I was gone, but she wrote a bill and insisted I pay for his tenancy. This is when crap hit the fan. I finally stand my ground. Extortion is the limit. Everything is falsified. I think it was the Vicodin talking and making her brave. As an aside, that will be super relevant later, her employer had an open fraud case against her. She told me early in my tenancy because she dared them to come after her. Perhaps she should have not dared so hard. After the fake tenancy debacle, crap gets real. I take off work to read up on my rights and to protect my dog and my stuff, and she starts harassing me. Specifically, she did these things over the course of a few days. She called from a blocked number and asked for a stripper and call girl. She called my work as a new landlord seeking a reference and told them I was partying, which is why I wasn't at work, and then came into my yard at 11 at night, stomped up on my porch to scare me, then walked out of the yard, claiming it was a free country when asked what the heck she was doing. She called the Humane Society and told them I had a vicious dog on the loose who attacked her dog. She even called the police and sent them to my job, I work with kids, claiming she found drugs in my house. Needless to say, I was pretty freaked out by all of these things. I got a TRO against her, and she couldn't keep trying to ruin my career and get my dog euthanized and attempt to intimidate me. It was good for 3 years. I was happy I won in court. It was a great move for my safety and empowerment. However, when I did move, about 10 days after her extortion, she falsified documents, kept my deposit, and I was forced to go back to court to get my money. Again, I won, and although it took a lot of time and energy, eventually it was garnished from her account. I not only got out of my lease, rightfully, but took my deposit money back against her will. I had a restraining order for 3 years, and she did not know my new address. I was thrilled. The torment she put me through was unbelievable. So, let's cut to the revenge. Remember that fraud case that she boasted about? Well, it came back to bite her. Landlord boldly did construction, high as a kite on Vicodin, while collecting disability because she was wheelchair bound. See the issue here? She played the system to get into paid early retirement, ate pills all day, increased her property value by building up her space, and collected money from illegal rentals. 4 months before I moved out, she was doing construction, and I had a strange feeling I should document her fraud. I knew she could turn on me at any point, and well, I'm sure glad I had the foresight to do so. She had gone to work the first day of her contract and fallen out of a wheelchair on a ramp that was not up to code. Almost 4 weeks later, to the day, she was happily at home, continuing with her activities, building a tool shed from scratch. She was doing construction with no wheelchair, duh. She was bold and figured that she could never get caught. She was doing all sorts of physical activity. I decided to film her and made sure the date was noted. I also took pictures. Some part of me just knew that I should document what I was seeing because she was an awful human who was leeching off the system. She worked in education and she couldn't be fired. Her position was tenured and she was holding her spot while on medical leave for over 4 years. They legally could not hire a new teacher. Substitutes poured in and out of her classroom. Hundreds of children missed out on a legitimate education because she held her spot. She was scum. I worked in a similar field, so I knew what damage she was doing with her actions. Back to the eviction and TRO event. Shortly after moving out, when the restraining order was in effect, I went to her employer and offered evidence in his fraud case. It was a serious state-led fraud case against her. They were going after her. He was elated that I had such strong evidence, and he put me in touch with private investigators. I handed over the evidence after sitting down with them and giving my statement of her activity and of how she was mobile at home. I didn't have to exaggerate and I didn't have to lie. I just told them exactly what happened. Even if she didn't burn me, I felt like I was doing my civic duty by ensuring the kids had a real teacher in their classroom instead of this piece of garbage. Months later, I called the investigators and found out that my evidence was what really sealed the deal. She was convicted of disability fraud. She was fired from her position and was potentially going to pay back years' worth of disability payments. I did that. I am the reason her scam fell apart. She thought she could bully me into extortion. She didn't. She thought she could ruin my career and hurt my dog when I stood up to her. She didn't. In fact, I won. It was what I needed to be empowered after she had crapped on me. It wasn't even revenge as much as standing up for myself. If she did have to pay it back, she'd only have her house to pay with. My dream is that she lost her house, ended up with a renter, and just hopes for a kind landlord. I mean, this is huge because this lady was not just treating OP badly, but had a whole system of fraud underneath it all. And also not just making money from the disability, not actually being wheelchair bound, which is a complete slap in the face to everyone else, but also staying on as a teacher at a position where they could not fire her. They could not hire a new teacher, and so the children suffered for that with their education. I mean, I wish that there was some loophole around that they could have got rid of her, but it sounds like OP had enough. And you know what? These people think that they can do all these plans and get away with them because nobody found them out yet. I'll just take advantage. Nobody is going to actually stand up against me. I'll just scare these people. And then finally, OP has the guts to stand up, lay it all out, and take her whole scam and idea completely down. Way to go, OP. What do you think? My neighbor cut my trees, posted by Regular Kahuna with concluded updates. Now, I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice, but this story has a crazy twist at the end you won't expect. About a month after I moved into my new house, my neighbor cut half a dozen old growth trees, 12 to 23 inch in diameter, in a cold weather climate near the property line. I had a survey done, $800, and discovered that all the trees cut were on my property. The owner of the house is a real estate agent married to a private contractor, so I suspect they knew what they were doing and were trying to take advantage of my ignorance. I have their email address from the HOA, and I'm wondering if I should write a demand letter and send it certified mail, email and ask what's going on, or hire a lawyer. State laws in New Hampshire suggest that I'm entitled to 3 times the value of the trees, but I don't even know how to value the trees. I wouldn't have cut them, and now I have to look at my neighbor's house instead of the trees. Please help. Update 1. I met with a lawyer and gave him my version of events along with estimates from my arborist and the plot from my surveyor. The value of the timber makes the theft a felony in this state, and since the trees were within 55 feet of a protected shoreland, they will likely have to pay a hefty administrative fine to the state for not getting the proper permits before cutting the trees. We know they didn't get the permit because it would have required a survey and shown that trees they had wanted to cut were on my property. The lawyer is familiar with the lady of the house from her real estate dealings, mostly closing and title works, and said she's a pain in the butt and that she doesn't like to admit fault. It's gonna be a long slog. Update 2. It's been a month and we finally gotten a detailed drawing of landmarks from the surveyor to confirm that the surveyor got the lines plotted correctly, comprehensive estimates from a landscaper based on photos provided by the previous owner of the house, and timber values from an arborist. Now that everything is squared away in that regard, we're getting ready to submit a demand letter. The one question my lawyer asked is if I should include a value in the demand letter or if I should invite them to contact my lawyer for further details. What would be the pros and cons of each approach? Final update. Today, they settled with me for $35,000 after legal fees. Bonus update. Neighbor may be poisoning my dog. A few years ago, I won a $35,000 claim against my neighbor when they cut several of my trees down. Since then, they sent hate email, thrown garbage on my lawn, and yelled obscenities at me when I'm in my yard. One email said they'd call the cops if my dog barks, among other really mean things, but I don't have anything else I can show the police. I've just ignored them, except for 2 incidents when I asked her not to throw treats over my 4-foot fence. She just told me to move. She's still very angry nearly 4 years later. Today, I had to take my dog to the vet with ethylene glycol poisoning. I have a fenced side yard that borders my neighbor's yard where we let the dog out to do her business. In the past, usually on weekends, she vomits and we chalked it up to dietary indiscretion, but I bought automotive ethylene glycol test strips on suggestion of a friend. Today, her vomit tested positive for ethylene glycol, so I rushed her to the vet who confirmed she'd ingested antifreeze. They're treating her to the tune of $3,000. While waiting at the vet's office, I ordered a camera to mount in the yard and a basket muzzle to keep her from eating anything in my yard. I don't know what else to do that might connect the dots between the treats I've seen them throw in my yard in the past and the antifreeze poisoning my dog is suffering with today. Do I have any legal recourse? Updates in the comments from OP in response to a comment about the camera. I had a camera there, but it covers my yard, not what the neighbors are doing. I could see where she, or my dog, was messing around reviewing the footage while I was waiting at the vet's office, but my partner couldn't find anything there. I also don't think that would have caught anything small chucked over the fence, like the treats that I'd seen them throwing before. My dog will be at the vet's office until Tuesday. The meds have to be administered on regular intervals until the poison is out of her system. The house feels very empty right now. In response to a comment telling them to contact the police. Thanks, I made the report this evening. I just have to send them the medical report when the vet releases my doggo. The poster sharing this says, although the part with the dog is somewhat unresolved, it's been a year and the major conflict, the trees, is resolved, so I'm marking this as concluded. This just sounds like straight up, hey, I'm going to do what I want and get away with it because I have some power and I have some standing. You know what? Just because you're a high up person, you might have some wealth and power. You can't just do what you want like this. You can't go cutting trees down for your neighbors. I mean, do you think that they're just going to take it lying down and not fight back? These are their old trees. This is on their property. It's their stuff. Like I said before, I ain't a lawyer. This is not legal advice, but it is easy to see, too, that I'd be upset if I was a neighbor and my trees were cut down. And you know what? They won $35,000 in court after the legal fees. So much so that the neighbor gets salty and starts poisoning their dog. Now, there is no general proof of that exactly, but we all know what happened here, right? I mean, if you were OP, what would you do if you found your dog had ingested antifreeze from neighbors likely throwing treats over and doing this? OP, I am sorry you had to go through this. What do you think should happen next? Watching my neighbors enjoy their backyard when they won't allow us to enjoy ours. Posted by Luna Sosike. With an update. We have retired neighbors who were friendly when we moved in. It started with a quick wave over the fence. It has now escalated to every time they hear any of us in the backyard, they rush out and stand at their fence until we have to pass them again. Now there's only one way in and out of our yard, to listen to them talk. We'll often say bye and walk away and they're still talking. They'll often say, oh, all right, bye, as we close the door behind us to return inside. I always dreamed of having a big backyard, and I'm so frustrated that now we don't use it. At one point, one of the neighbors broke their leg. This isn't stopping her. Her husband came over, engaged us in conversation to stall us so his wife could come over too. She was hobbling along and complaining that she was in such pain as she leaned on the fence. Now, before you think they're lonely, they're not. I see their children and grandchildren over often. The breaking point was we bought a new pressure washer and wanted to test it out in the backyard. We were out there with our daughter and she was oohing and eyeing. It was a cute family moment. Of course, the neighbors took their spot on the fence and started just yelling to speak over the pressure washer. It was crazy to watch. The only person that goes into our yard now is the lawn care guy. I go out occasionally to pick fruit, but we haven't used our yard in months. My daughter and I play out in the front as we get more privacy facing a main street than we do in the backyard. Yesterday, a friend came over and wanted to see the orange trees that we have. We were on the other side of the yard when the neighbor came out and stood on the fence as usual. Even having a guest didn't deter her. I hurried my friend back inside as the neighbors essentially talked to herself. The update. A few months ago, I made a post about my neighbors that would not let us spend time in our backyard without sucking up all of our spare time with their chatter. I know it seems excessive, but we are a time-poor family. I work 4 days a week, my husband works full-time, I study full-time, and we have a toddler. In order to make it all work, my husband and I work alternating days, so we get only a few days off altogether a month. So you can imagine how angry I was that each time we wanted to spend family time outside, my neighbor would be there telling me about the time her baby died, how sick her sister is, how sick they have been, or some other tragedy. Anyway, I read through everyone's comments, cheers by the way, and while I can't construct a way to block their view of us, I took the rest of your advice. I starved them of attention until we weren't a viable source anymore. Each time that I went out, I would smile, nod, and then put all my headphones in and carry on with what I needed to do. Mowed the lawn, picked up dog junk, cleaned out the garden beds, played with the dog. It took about 3 months, but they got the message. I was annoyed each time that I had to go out because it felt like a chore stacked onto another chore. Now I had to go mow my lawn, but also ensure that I didn't make eye contact with the fence that I knew my neighbors were standing at, desperately trying to get my attention so they could tell me about their latest bout of gastro. I'm still not comfortable trying to go out into the backyard to spend time as a family because I'm anxious they'll harass us again. It's slow progress, but hopefully once the weather warms up, we'll be back to having backyard picnics. Neighbors that will never be satisfied, posted by Maggie102899. So our neighbors of a few years have increasingly caused issues with us over how we do things in our yard. When my mom tried to build a fence to separate us, they protested and got our other neighbors' support. Their current issue with us is that our sprinklers have been staining their driveway. My mom has gotten our landscaper to adjust the sprinklers at least 3 times already, but the husband keeps complaining even though the water barely gets on their driveway. I wonder how he feels when it rains, jeez. My sister saw him in our yard messing with our sprinklers the other day. We don't know what to do. Just now, my mom was watering our plants and both the wife and husband came outside to berate her. The husband started yelling at her and the wife ordered his little witch self inside, but then she continued to yell at my mom. They're always watching us. I don't feel comfortable swimming in our pool, which is such a shame and waste. We just got it remodeled. We are getting the landscaper to come out this week to fix the sprinklers again, but we know they'll just complain again. Any ideas? This causes my mom so much stress, and the wife is always acting innocent and confused as to why my mom gets upset with her. It causes stress throughout our whole family. My little sister is breaking down in tears right now. There's a lot more information that I can share to clear things up, but I just wanted to share what their current complaint was to us. They will never leave us alone. Once we fix one thing for them, they find another. And no, we're not going to move. We've lived in this house for over 20 years. This commenter gives OP a suggestion and we get an HOA answer back. Put up a fence, tell the jerks to stay off your property and call the police if they harass you. And OP says, initially we had HOA rules saying that we couldn't put up a wooden fence, and thanks to these neighbors and them trying to get more rules enacted, the HOA for our neighborhood eventually disbanded. While all of this was happening and my mom was believing she couldn't build a fence, she instead got bushes planted that are meant to grow and give us privacy, spending a lot of money instead of spending it on a fence. These bushes are still knee level even after 2 years, so it's going to take a while. We've even had to deplant a few bushes because of these neighbors. We have a creek running behind both our backyards, and sometimes the city needs to come and check the pipeline that runs through it, and our neighbors wouldn't allow the city to drive on their driveway, so we had to move 4 of those bushes so they could get access and drive through our yard on the grass. Now those bushes are sitting in 4 pots awaiting to be moved if needed. When we first got the bushes, a lot of them had been dying for no reason, and we had to get them replaced. We have a suspicion that our neighbors tampered with them because our landscaper said it looks like someone put something on the bushes to kill it, and we would never do this. These bushes are right next to their driveway, by the way. We also had individual sprinklers placed to water each bush, but they kept malfunctioning or getting cut. Like, come on, that has to be them. So, this definitely hasn't helped in their growth and is another reason we have our regular sprinklers on. Now my mom has to walk out and manually water each bush. My mom spent all this money for an alternative for a fence and is very hesitant about building an actual one. Also, if we did build one, our neighbors would give us absolute heck and the city wouldn't be able to access the pipeline in our creek. We'd have to dig up all of the bushes and move the fence over to give them enough clearance. My mom now regrets this decision. Also, the wife is always texting my mom complaining about things, and I've told my mom to block her number, but she can still come out and yell at us in person. Any more ideas or thoughts? Another update. Whenever I do go outside, whether in my backyard or pool, which unfortunately faces their house, the dad always seems to come outside to do something like wash his car or mow. Also, he mows at least 10 times a week or does the leaf blower early in the morning and during the day multiple times and awakes me from sleeping and naps. My family thinks it's his way of getting away from his wife, so he keeps everything pristine outside so he doesn't have to deal with her inside. I've also seen them looking out their kitchen window into our yard on several occasions. I will mention, we never had any problems with them until my dad died a few years ago, and the wife even mentioned the first time they complained about something that my dad would have been more compliant, that they never had any issues with him, but that was before they started complaining. My dad never did anything to help around in the backyard, so it's not like anything has changed. It actually looks a little nicer now. We've added a stone pathway and an arch with flowers around it and so on. Super good comment says, ignore, wear headphones, do not react. Seriously, no reaction will kill her. If she escalates into violence, throwing things and so on, call the cops and always record her. No reaction. Seriously. And OP unfortunately says, I'll get my mom to try this, but the wife literally gaslights my mom by saying, I don't know why you're mad, we've always been nice to you. She acts innocent and confused as to why my mom is angry. It's infuriating. And we have an answer. I'm putting up these privacy fence screens around the metal fence that surrounds our pool for a little more privacy. I'm doubling them for even more privacy. My mom doesn't love the look of them though, but this is a temporary fix for a little more privacy. All I gotta say, after living near bad neighbors and good neighbors, you really grow to appreciate those awesome neighbors that you live near that leave you alone and not the bad ones that creep you out when they're beside of you. Neighbors trespassing because they don't like my yard, posted by Lizarding Loudly. Hi there. I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood in a small town. I've never been one for lawn maintenance. I actually hate lawns and view them as a freaking scam. And my next door neighbor to the east is obsessed with her lawn, watering it every day, even in 100-degree weather, mowing it once a week, having her grandson mow, I should say. It's always dark green with no weeds. That's fine with me. It's her yard. However, I don't believe in wasting water for vanity, nor do I like emissions from lawnmowers. I have an electric one. Have I ever, or would I ever say anything about this to her? Nope, because again, it's her lawn. I'm sure you can see where this is going. I let my lawn get pretty long, mostly from how busy I am. On top of a full-time job, half an hour away, I'm a gigging musician and spend several weeknights and weekends out of town. I also just don't really believe in lawns. I'm hoping to plant a clover one this fall after I check city ordinances. It doesn't help either that it took a while to get my hands on a string trimmer, and I was only very recently able to afford the yard cart to have the city take yard waste to the compost pile. I refuse to just throw it away. Organic matter does not need to go into the regular trash. Anyways, I guess between her, the house directly across the street, and my neighbors on the other side, this has become a hot topic and one they discuss between themselves. Recently, someone called the city on me over the backyard, which no one can see except for a glimpse from each direct neighbor's driveway. Also, the daughter-in-law of the neighbor to the east has messaged me asking if I would please let her son mow because my yard is affecting her mother-in-law's sanity, and has also offered to come help because my neighbors are really upset about it. Multiple times this week, someone had come onto my property to mow or weed whack or move stuff around while I'm at work. They don't talk to me about it first, they don't leave a note, they just do it. Someone also broke some of the pots on my side porch, which I realized may have been an accident, but it's still annoying. I got home from work last night intending to mow the front because it is a little long even for me. I spent time a few days ago pulling weeds in preparation to mow, even making sure to cut off the blown dandelion heads and then throw them in the waste bin separately so it wouldn't spread seeds. I have to mow the lawn in segments so my mower can charge, but when I got home yesterday, someone had already mowed. I have been making progress in other areas, cleaning up leaves, putting more stuff in the garage so it's not visible, and so on. I'd like to think they're being helpful, but I'm almost positive they're doing it for them, not me. I don't like that they're coming onto my property without asking. I don't want to create a huge rift in the neighborhood, but it's so annoying. In my opinion, if your neighbor's yard bothers you so much, talk to them directly or go to therapy or both. Should I leave everyone a note asking them to please stay off my property? Visit houses individually? Like I said, I'm not wanting to get antagonistic about it, but I seriously want everyone to stop getting in my stuff. I'm sure to some people I am the neighbor from heck, and that's fine if that's how you feel. I understand that everyone values different things. Update from OP. A commenter says, I wish my neighbors would mow my lawn. I have to pay somebody to mow it. And OP says, I've gone that route in the past. Jerk just ran over some of my flowers with his mower, obviously pretty ones that were under the mailbox and had every right to be there. And he said he wouldn't mow unless I paid him to come every week, which I understand from a business model point of view, but I don't make that kind of money for that kind of expense. One commenter jumps on OP and says, not believing in lawn care does not mean you don't have to maintain it. Either put the clover lawn in ASAP or cut your grass before it becomes a jungle. And OP replies, it's maintained, just not up to their standards, I guess. I'm hoping to work in the clover lawn in this fall. It can't be planted when it's too awful hot, and it's in the hundreds every day around here for a while. Great comment here. An overgrown yard isn't just an eyesore, it's a breeding ground for snakes and rodents. That does affect your neighbors. And what about your property value and how it looks too? So look, you gotta maintain your lawn. I just recently bought a Husqvarna zero-turn mower and I love it. Absolutely amazing mower. You gotta try a zero-turn if you never have. I'm sold on it for life. And actually, you know what? I'm gonna go mow tomorrow and I am gonna enjoy myself in the hot 90-degree weather. I hope so at least. I'm filing a lawsuit, posted by American Water Lily, with more info in the comments. I work part-time at a store known for home decor and kitchen accessories. This is a really good job for me to have while I'm still in college. I've had my fair share of weird experiences with customers, but no one has been outwardly rude or verbally abusive towards me. As a former barista, I really appreciate this aspect. This specific incident occurred last week when I was closing. It was probably around 8 p.m. when I heard a loud crash from where I was up at the registers. My first instinct was to assume that someone was having a heart attack or a seizure, so immediately I run towards the sound of yelling. As a quick side note, our store has an undercover police detective who helps with loss and prevention. He was there that evening and immediately told me to go back to the registers because there was blood everywhere. A few customers told me what was going on, and then I was asked to help clean up the blood. We have proper sanitation equipment to do this without it becoming a hazard. I was still confused as heck until our detective came and told me everything. When I asked him what had happened, he said, some lady injured herself on purpose and got blood everywhere. She keeps yelling in the bathroom that she's going to sue the company. I asked him if he was sure she did it on purpose, and he said he saw the whole thing on the security cameras. I was pretty speechless at this point. We've never had this happen at our store. I ended up seeing the lady on her way out, and the craziest thing was that her injury was minor. She also kept claiming that she was a nurse, yet somehow managed to get blood everywhere. What kind of nurse doesn't know how dangerous blood can be? Before she left, she said over and over, I'm filing a lawsuit, you guys are messed up. We ended up leaving an hour after we were supposed to because of the mess. I can't wait until her lawyer sees the video footage and comes to the same conclusion the rest of us did. Updates. Someone suggested this Karen does not have a lawyer, and OP says, I know, it was just kind of amusing to hear her whining about it. This is a funny story here. I would love to see her face when she hears about the video, Red Truck 007 says. I worked loss prevention many years ago when slip and pay was big. I had a report of a guy slipping and called the police because he was being way too loud about it. The cop shows up and asks for his ID, looks at it a second, and informs the guy he was the same cop to take his slipping report down the street 2 days ago. He left with the officer. Someone asked OP, so what actually happened? How did she purposely hurt herself? If the injury was minor, why was there so much blood? OP says, the area where she cut herself bleeds a lot, but she didn't hurt herself that badly. She didn't need stitches or an ER visit. She kept waving her hand around and the blood splattered everywhere. So she purposely cut her hand open on a sharp item exposed in your store? Sort of. She dropped the item and it broke, and she intentionally cut her hand from one of the pieces. My store is super careful about anything sharp. Most sharper items are wrapped packaging. They're never just out on the floor for people to hurt themselves on accident. I totally would have said something, but she actually looked like she may have been high on drugs, so I chose not to get involved. She is now banned from the store though. So true, I hear of people threatening to sue and then getting laughed at by the judge. I'm sure it happens a lot. Oh, Karen, if you're going to cut yourself like this and then try to just say, I'm going to sue you, then yeah, you deserve to be in trouble. Jeez. HOA story time. It's called Unintended and Unwelcome Consequences, with an update from OP Colorado expat. Picky, noisy neighbors who have the president of the local homeowners association on speed dial are a real nuisance. One day a few years ago, my faithful old Volvo gave up the ghost. The automatic transmission was slowly going out. The final blow was when an oil line to an external oil filter developed a pinhole leak and the engine seized when all the oil escaped. I had the car towed home, and it sat in the driveway for a month or so while I tried to decide what to do with it. The options being to replace both the engine and transmission, or to sell it off cheap either for parts or to someone who wanted to get it running again. I finally, reluctantly, decided to let it go. I'd miss it, as it had been probably the best car that I'd ever had, and I'd done some serious upgrades and improvement to it. About this time, my neighbor called the HOA to complain that I had a junk car in the driveway that I was parting out. To hear her version, the president expected to see something on cinder blocks with no doors, the hood up, and no engine. The truth was that it was still intact, with current license plates and insurance. There was no way to tell from looking at it that it wasn't running. Nevertheless, I was given 1 week to either fix the car or have it gone. The busybody neighbor was known for being extremely conservative. She made teabaggers seem middle of the road. One of the things which she had a particular dislike for was the local NPR radio station, which was associated with the local university. The station was running a fundraiser at the time, so I decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I donated the car to the radio station. The appointed Saturday came around, and the car was being picked up by a tow truck when she came out to watch the proceedings with a smug look. She commented to me that it was about time that piece of junk was being removed. When I replied that I donated it to the local NPR station, her smug look was instantly replaced by horror, quickly followed by livid anger. She stalked back into her house and slammed the door. I was happy that even to the last, my trusty Volvo had been useful. This was enough to satisfy me. There's a line between payback and harassment. Also, I didn't think a vendetta would have been justified. Her complaints have since become self-defeating. The HOA pretty much ignores her now. She switched her focus to a couple of young families who moved in. Her take of parents and their friends sitting out on the front porch, watching their kids playing, took the form of alleging gang activity. The HOA found that accusation to be so over the top, they now blow off her complaints. Click my next crazy HOA Karen compilation on your screen to continue your listening session. Thanks for checking this one out, and see you in the next one.